You're welcome. I'm going to move up closer.
Yeah, feel free to move on up. All right, we are going to get started with my one student in here. So that's going to be on my practice, on the quiz there. I'm going to ask, how many students actually showed up to this workshop? One. So we're going to be talking about graduate admissions test and, just graduate school in general. We'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the exams that we'll primarily focus in on will be the GRE, the LSAT, and then the MCAT. And so what I always like to do is always have people in the audience, which is my one person, kind of introduce themselves, but tell me why you came to this workshop. What are you hoping to try to gain? So that way I can try to address some of those issues.
Okay, hello, I'm Rachel Hirsch. I'm currently a senior. So I'm here because I'm graduating soon. And I'd like to know all the different tests I need to take in order to get to graduate school.
Okay, all right. So a little overview, focus in on. So some things. There's some questions that we'll look at here. I mean, obviously we're going to talk about what is the GRE, what's on the GRE. We'll do the same thing for the LSAT and the MCAT. And then I also have a list of various resources. Because one of the things that you're going to learn pretty fast is that you have to put in time studying for whatever standardized test that you have. Now I can tell you just kind of a rule of thumb. GRE, you probably want to invest at least 3 months studying, at least. LSAT, probably more like about 6 months. And then the MCAT, for some people, you will want to probably study for about a year for the MCAT. Sounds pretty crazy. But the reason why is because, each of the exams, like on average, it's like over 3 hours, for the GRE. We'll look at specific time, I think it's 3 hours, 45 minutes. But like the MCAT is 7.5 hours long. Yeah, and it covers so many different sections. This is something that you really have to plan out. If you just go in there and you wing it, on an exam, you may not do it as well. Now, some people, I will tell you, they're just natural test takers. They don't have to study hardly, and they can still do great. I'm not one of those, students. So, put in the time. And more importantly, part of the reason why you're putting in the time is to help control nerves. Because when you go in there and take that test, you're going to be nervous. And so the more you practice, the less nervous, hopefully anyways, that you'll be when you take it. But what really gets students is time. Because you're timed on this test, on each of these different sections. And so a lot of times students can do the work, but they're not fast enough, so they just have to bubble in stuff towards the end because they're running out of time. And that's why it ends up hurting their score. So you've got to get your time down. So always try to test yourself on it, but timing yourself. So that way when you go in there, you're at least able to keep pace, with what you're supposed to do. Now we'll look at the actual times and all that stuff here in a second. So we'll look at the GRE real fast and take a look at that. So, for example, the GRE, some basic things. This is the graduate level admissions exam. This is typically what most programs are going to require for most graduate schools. Now there are some exceptions, but primarily if you're going into, let's say, English, anything in the liberal arts related stuff, you will be taking the GRE. Now there are a few programs that are out there that don't require that. And I will tell you, a lot of online universities don't always require that. Some more, I think, are going towards that now, but like maybe 5 years ago, a lot of students didn't have to take the GRE for online, schools. But like I said, there's pros and cons, to those online schools, especially the cost. Business programs, you typically see the GRE, very common, for that. Duration of it, 3 hours and 45 minutes. And so you will be taking, I know you're going to be taking the GRE, that's what time, basically 4 hours.
Right there in the fall.
Yeah. And one thing that you also, and they don't always tell you this, but you really want to be looking at site locations. Like, where do you want to take this exam?
I think Pittsburgh has a good state.
Yeah, there's Pittsburgh. Springfield tends to be pretty popular around this area. Some even do it, down there, in Arkansas as well. So I'd always be trying to pick an area that you feel comfortable with. You're already going to be nervous as it is, so you really want to try to find the best, location where you feel comfortable. I always tell students, if they can afford it, try to get a hotel the night before. So that way you're not worrying about trying to rush up there in the morning or whatever, trying to beat traffic. really, I hate for students to have to get up like super early, in order to get up to that location. I'd always recommend stay the night before. Stay at a hotel, just relax, never do anything that night before. It's just enjoying yourself.
Do you bring anything to the area with you? Like, besides, like, do you bring a pencil or?
Well, yeah, I mean, every site location is different, but
Like,
typically,
on the website, probably?
yeah, I mean, once you like fill out, take the GRE, they will tell you exactly what they will accept in there and what they don't. I mean, typically, you don't bring a phone. You leave your phone in your car, you put it up, whatever. I mean, normally it's pencil. Sometimes that they will give you, like earplugs. So like if you're, kind of sensitive to sound, you can get those. Normally they're really cheap, so they're not really good, but they'll give you those. I mean, it's very limited what they will allow you to take in there. And so, and most of these, they allow you to have a break as well. It's not like you're doing 3 hours, 45 minutes nonstop. They normally give you a little break, here and there. It's like maybe a 15, 20-minute break. But it's, I mean, it's intense, Now, average score. So like if you're going to be going to a university and, the average score for the GRE is a 150.
Okay, that was my question too. U of A wanted like a 4.0 percentile.
Yeah.
I don't know what that meant. Do you know what that
Okay,
means?
we're gonna talk about that. So the scale. So first we'll look at the scale. So a 130 to 170 is their scale for the GRE. So that is the scale. So basically you show up and you write your name on it, you're gonna get a 130, basically. And so if you notice there, essentially close to the middle, as I said, is around that 150 average. Now on the writing sample, and I'll go to this, and let me tell you the cost, it's $205. So $205 for this. Now next slide will actually kind of address your question a little bit. That's a lot of money, $205. I mean, not everyone can just sit there and just shell out $205 at once. I always say, one, you need to kind of time when you want to take that exam. So when you take that exam, let's say, for example, you're going to take it in the fall. Well, just hypothetically. So maybe September, October range, give or take. And so I would start putting money back slowly each month, until you have to pay. So most likely you'd be paying, registering for it probably in the summertime. So now is that time to be putting $10 back, $15 here. So that way you're not having to shell out $205 all at once. So start putting that little back. Maybe you decide, you got a little ways, in order to take that exam, so you get a refund check, from your financial aid. Put the money back in, for it. So start planning early. Also, let's say if you're going to take your exam, we'll say hypothetically September. When should you start studying? When should you start planning to actually really start cracking open the books and studying for it? Yeah, at least, June. I always say now if you're not a great test taker, you may want to start a little before then. Average I'd say is, study 3 months, but I mean, if you know it's going to be an issue and a struggle, I'd probably start, April or May, as well. Because you got to remember that even if you start around that April or May, who says that you're going to be like diligent every single week? You're going to have things that happen in life, and things are going to come up, and you may not be able to study as much that week. And so by starting a little early, you're kind of giving yourself, some, like if I make a mistake or I don't really do exactly what I'm supposed to every single week. You're giving yourself a little bit of a cushion, And they have so many things online nowadays where you can look at kind of their plans, like they map out every week what you could be doing. You could be breaking down each section. So when we look at the sections, at least for the GRE, there are typically around 3 sections. There's the verbal, the quantitative. Now that's more the math part of it. So if you're not good at math, this will give you a little bit more time to be preparing for that. And then obviously the analytical, writing. Now the writing section that they have, which I can tell you since you want to major in English, they're going to look at that more heavily. They have a scale, and it's 0 to 6. And they normally want you to have a 4, in that range.
Okay.
So that is something that, now I can say if you have like a 3 something, I mean, that's still fine. But normally they want you on that writing sample, the section 0 to 6, a 4 is considered really good. I mean that's solid. What they want. It's not easy getting that 4. They're pretty critical on judging the writing. And so that's why you really want to start preparing, for those writing samples that you have to do. And with your program, they're probably going to emphasize that, look at that a little bit more, versus someone who's not going into a field that requires a lot of writing. Now you may ask yourself, why are they emphasizing the writing part of it? It's largely because you do write a lot of papers in graduate school. My graduate school program, which is a public administration, almost every single class I had to write a 25 to 30 page paper, every single class. So I mean, there's a great deal of writing involved. And so that's why, they're going to emphasize pretty heavily about trying to get, on that scale from 0 to 6, a 4. Because, they want to know that you can write. Now, and they kind of do it weird on their increments. So like, you can get like a 2.5, a 3, 3.5. I mean, their scale is a little different. So you see a lot of, 2.5s, 3.5s, on that scale out of 6. It's actually pretty common. So you don't just get 1 point, 2.3, you get like half points as well. So yeah, the writing part you definitely need to pay a lot of attention towards. The main thing is speed. You've got to get your speed down, being able to write in that time frame. That's what hurts people, on that GRE, is that they just don't have a lot of time. And so just write as much as you possibly can under test conditions, timing yourself and what you're going to do. Remember, total 3 hours and 45 minutes. So like when you're taking some practice exams, I would be timing yourself. And the book will actually break it down section by section, how much time you have, but make sure you're actually staying under those time conditions. I think that's a big mistake that students make, is they'll practice, the GRE, but most of the time they're not timing themselves. And so when they actually go take the real one, I mean, they're doing great, when they're doing the practice, but you're taking your time. And so it's just completely different when you get in there. Not to mention you're factoring in the nerves. So the more practice exams that you take, I think the better it calms the nerves. I would say on average, most people should take probably around 6 to 8 practice exams before they take the real one, if it was me, in that area. Now I will say, some people are just great test takers. They don't need it that much. But me personally, I would say do that. Now, I know you had a few questions because I'm going to be moving on to the LSAT here in a second. So I wanted to see what questions you have about the GRE before we really go in depth on the LSAT.
So, for graduate school, for online graduate schools, you would have to take the GRE too?
It all depends on the program. Every online university is different. There are quite a few, online programs that don't require the GRE. So it's really just getting on there and looking and seeing which one that particular university has. Like I said, we were talking earlier, my program, at OU specifically for the MPA degree, didn't require it, as long as your GPA was at least a 3.0 or higher. And so we even do that here at this university. So like the master's programs, a lot of them anyways, especially like the criminal justice, the business department, as long as you have a high enough GPA, they don't require you to take the GRE here. So it's not bad, but you got to meet that requirement. Now, if you're going to apply to a lot of different universities, sometimes it's better to take the GRE, because you may have one university that doesn't, but another one that does. So it's better just to take the GRE, apply to various universities, and then just go with the best, offer, that they have. The problem that, I think we were talking about earlier about online programs is, sometimes they require the GRE, sometimes they don't, but you got to look at the cost. It all comes down to that cost. You're certainly getting the convenience factor, of doing online, but I will tell you, sometimes you will pay 20, 30, 40% more going to an online program versus, on campus. We're also talking, earlier, before workshop about the scholarship opportunities. There's not a lot out there when it comes to the online programs. That's an issue, because if you're going to be shelling out close to 50, 60 grand when it's all said and done for a master's program, if you go to a university that's going to offer you a TA position or some on-campus related job that's going to give you a stipend, I'd rather go to that place, because chances are I'm going to save $20,000, $30,000, in the end, just because of those scholarships, stipends, and so forth. Because when you graduate, we talked about if you're in $60,000, $70,000 in debt when you graduate, and you're just doing the minimum payment for graduate school, you're going to pay almost double if you do in a bare minimum, and stretch it out as long as you can because of all that interest. Graduate student loans are generally a lot higher. Undergrad, you may be paying, and it's been a while, but I think maybe you pay 4%, give or take, somewhere around there for some of those loans. Well, it's normally about 6 or 7% in graduate school, for student loans. So it's a lot higher, and so I would just always want to be careful when it comes to that price. Because what if, for example, maybe you graduate as an undergrad with $20,000 in student loan debt, and then you have $50,000 or $60,000 in student loan debt for your master's. And then you decide, I'm going to go work on my PhD. And then you get another, $40,000 or $50,000, give or take. I mean, now you're looking at about $120,000, $130,000 in student loans. If you do the minimum payment, you're going to be probably paying back with all the interest, probably about over $200,000 and something, and your bill will probably be about $700, $800 or more a month, paying it, because of that. And so you got to ask, is it financially worth it? So when we start talking about the LSAT, it may be worth it because chances are you're going to be making a lot more money as a lawyer, or the MCAT, if you become a doctor. The salaries, is probably going to help you be able to pay back those student loans. So maybe it's financially worth it, to be able to go to grad school for those and pay that back. But what if you go into a field where you're only making 30, 40, 50,000? It gets a little bit harder unless you have a 2-income family and you can make those payments. So even though when we're talking about graduate admissions tests, I always tell students, worry about the cost. Because I've been paying my student loans now, this is my 10th year paying on them. And so I'm still paying for my master's degree, and that was 10 years ago. So I'm reminded every single month about those student loans, which I'm not a fan. So always be careful. I think we should always want to pursue our dream, but at the same time, you got to remember those dreams cost. And so LSAT we'll briefly go through here because I know that I don't think there's anyone that's going to take this here. So the LSAT's a law school admissions test. If you want to go to law school, you have to take this exam. It's very popular here in the United States and of course Canada. Even though a lot of other countries are starting to move towards the LSAT, it's another 3 hours and 45 minutes long, exam. $190 it costs. The scale is from 120 to 180. The average is generally around the 150 range, give or take. Yep, around that 150, 155, just kind of depends. Now I would tell you every university is different on what they want on the LSAT. I would say if you score a 150, you at least have a chance to get into a law school.
What about for GRE?
GRE, if you get a 150, you have a chance. There's no guarantee. It all comes down to how many people are applying for the program, how competitive is it in general, and then of course also the people who are applying, they kind of look at the average score of the people who are applying. So what if you just have a really good pool of students who are applying, and most of them are in the mid 150s, but they only have maybe 30 spots. Obviously, your GPA, other factors will be important, but they really look at those standardized tests. And why would you think they would look at the standardized test versus the GPA sometimes? Why would that be important? Why would you think that would be?
Cumulative will be learned in college.
Part of that, yeah. Another factor is every university is different when it comes to how difficult it is. So you may go to one unit. Let's just say hypothetically, you get, you have a 3.8 GPA here, but you scored, let's say, a 145. So you didn't really score very high on the GRE. And then you go to, let's say Harvard, and you have, maybe, a 3.0. Which one are they going to consider more prestigious than Harvard, probably? Well, at least courses-wise.
3.0 from Harvard.
Yeah, from Harvard. Because, some programs and some universities are just harder universities. So that's why they look at the standardized test, because everyone, no matter which university you're at, has to take it. So they feel like they can use that as the standardized test. That's supposed to basically judge everyone equally, even though in reality I don't think it does, because what if you're just not a good test taker? And so I don't really think it's necessarily fair, but that's generally what they use. And so same thing with the LSAT. I had quite a few friends that took the LSAT, went to law school. I had one friend who had a 3.8 GPA. He took the LSAT, he did not do well. He scored in the low 140s, which is well below even the average, the average of 150. He applied he did not get in. All the universities he applied, he didn't get in, there. I had another friend who did not have a good GPA. I mean, he was like the bare minimum student. And he didn't do great on the LSAT. He did average, but not great. He got in. Now, another key factor that helped him get in, his dad was a judge, and who went to the university that he got into. So, and his dad had donated lots of money to that university, so he got in. So he was like the special case. Yes, he was a special case. Then I had some other students who had good GPA, average LSAT score, they got in. So I mean, you never know. I mean, GPA is important, but these standardized tests weigh pretty heavily. I mean, I will say that that's probably about maybe 60–70% of their decision making is from those standardized tests. So if you bomb, the GRE or the LSAT, you're going to want to retake it. I mean, so I would say at least have that minimum, that 150. If you score below that, you're taking a chance. You're just taking a chance on getting in at that point.
Now, if you have to retake it, you have to pay the $200 again.
Oh yes, money, money, money. Yes, they love their money. So you always want to be. I always think worst case scenario. That's just how I operate. And so when I'm planning, I'm always planning. Okay, I may have to retake this, and so you want to be thinking about that in the budget. Like okay, and like some people, they'll take the test and then they have to wait a little bit in order to get the results. You got to ask yourself, do I keep studying? Once I'm even done with this, do I keep studying and do my plan and preparing just in case I have to take this test again?
Right.
So it's just, I just say always expect the worst, hope for the best. It's just trying to get in that mindset. Now, when we talk about the cost, I mean, yes, it's $190 for this. I mean, going to law school, for example, you're probably going to end up spending around $120,000 to $150,000 in order to go to law school. GRE, when you go to master's program, it's normally 2 years that you're in graduate school, if you go full time. If you go to law school, it's 3 years, and then of course you take your bar and so forth. And then of course we'll look at, the MCAT with medical school. Normally, it's about 4 years, at medical school, because you have to do a residency and that takes longer too. So in the end, I mean, it's longer than that, but like academics wise, I mean, you're there for years. And you're looking at, 150, 200,000 or more for medical school as well. So I mean, you got to ask, is it worth the cost? And say, always want to crunch those numbers. So LSAT, some things is broken down. There's 4 sections in the LSAT. It's 35 minutes each section. It's all multiple choice. And most of the problems are around that 25, 26, questions per section. Which you'll typically see. There's reading comprehension, and you think, oh, that's not too bad, but I'm telling you, it's the type of reading comprehension where they try to trick you. Where they have like, they can have 2 answers that are basically right, but which one is the best answer? That's how all of these standardized tests can operate. And that's why it kind of confuses students, makes it a little bit more difficult.
I guess you just pick the gut feeling, you're like, this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not good at standardized tests. Now, the logic section I've heard is probably the hardest part on the LSAT, the logic games that you do. Give you an example, kind of a logic game. They may try to throw in a scenario where maybe you're on an airplane and you got like, there's all these seats and passengers in different spot, and then they'll give you different scenarios, and then you have to put like the arrangement in what order that it should go. So it's a little confusing, and remember, you are doing this in, that 35-minute time frame, these 4 passages typically. And so, I mean, you got to get fast, you got to get your timing down, practicing. And then there is a writing sample that they require on the LSAT, but they don't grade it. They don't grade the writing sample, but they send it to the law schools that you're applying for. So that way they can kind of judge your writing. So yeah, they're not grading it, but these universities, these law schools, they do get to see how you write. Because in the law school, at least according to my friends, most of all your exams are just essays. And a lot of them, you just have 1 test entire semester. Now, there's some are a little bit different, but a lot of times you have 1 comprehensive exam at the end of the semester, and you write about 20 to 30 pages. They'll give you a couple of questions, and you just write. You have to memorize everything that you learned for that entire semester when it comes to different court cases and stuff, and you have to make your argument right in that 20, 30 page paper in a blue book. You just write as much as you possibly can. It's pretty intimidating, so that's why they want to look at that writing sample, even though it's not technically graded. They want to look at that, and so yeah, I had quite a few friends that got their law degree, They walked away with $150,000 plus in debt. Now I will tell you, they're making good money. So but they got in a lot of debt in order to get that, because I had two friends that went to the same university. It was Oklahoma City School of Law. Most law schools, which they don't always tell you this, at least at the university, Oklahoma City University, they don't allow you to work your first year. You can actually get kicked out of law school if they find out that you're working during that first year, because they say it's so tough that you should not be working. You should be focusing 100%, studying, for at the university. So how do you support yourself, if you can't work? Loans. Lots of student loans. And so they, on average, with tuition and room and board, that they tell you to expect around $50,000 it's going to cost, at least at that university. And so that's $50,000 plus you're having to get student loans. Now sometimes, some students are a little bit older when they're going to law school, so maybe they have a spouse that's working potentially that could help offset some of that cost. But yeah, you're looking at 40, 50 grand a year, going to law school, and they don't want you working that first year. So yeah, it's you have to weigh the money factor when you're doing that. For them, it was worth it. They did it, and they're making good money now. But there was a lot of sacrificing, going there. And I can tell you, the LSAT was everything. That's how they got in. That was the deciding factor. Because if they would have bombed that LSAT, unless they have a rich dad who was a judge or whatever, they're not going to get in. MCAT, I always say the MCAT's probably the toughest out of the ones that we just mentioned. This is what you have to take if you want to go to medical school. It's multiple choice, standardized tests. You typically see this in the United States and Canada. It's a monster. It is a monster exam. 7.5 hours this exam is. It's one of those things that, the average score is around the 500 to 507. Their scale is 440 or 472 to 528 is their scale. The top 10% of test takers are normally that 514 to 528. Top 25 is that 508 to 513. And then below the 50% is people who are under, that 499. If you don't score a 500, it's almost impossible to go to medical school. It's very difficult. It's like the lottery. It's like, winning a lottery ticket, trying to get in. Because it's just so competitive. It's just very competitive. The cost, $310 just to even take it.
GRE was expensive.
And if you have to retake it, you have to spend more money. More money doing that. So.
And there's no, any not loans or anything to help with that?
Well, I would say, some places, that they offer stipends, like a hardship deal, but there is so much paperwork trying to get that approved because only a very small amount of people who actually would get it. It's like winning the lottery, trying to get that. So you got to start budgeting. Start budgeting early. One of the things I would tell students who are taking the MCAT, you want to study for about a year in advance, because this is 7.5 hour exam. Some of the sections that you have to cover is general chemistry, organic chemistry, general biology, biochemistry, physics, psychology, and sociology. So there's a lot of different sections that you have to cover. You really want to make sure you're taking the right coursework as an undergrad, that's going to possibly help you in that area. But yeah, you want to start planning about a year in advance studying. You want to take anywhere from 6 to 8 practice exams as well. I would be studying probably between 2 and 3 hours at least a day, just for this, and then of course taking those practice exams, timing yourself. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. This kind of breaks down each section, what the scoring system is. So each of these sections, generally a 118 to 132 is the range. The median is a 125, so we're breaking down each little section here. So if you score a 125 in each of these sections, basically you'll come out to around a 500, which is, you might get into medical school with a 500, maybe.
So if you get a 528, basically you're golden.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. But it's so rare to get that. Now, if you get a 510, you're probably going to get in. I mean, you're probably going to get it. You're going to have probably more than one option, of getting into, medical school. You get a 500, it's a roll of the dice. I mean, I still think you should apply to medical school if you have a 500, but it's all going to come down to who else is applying, what are their average scores. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, GPA, you typically have to have a 3.7. I mean, if you want to go to medical school, I mean, most of the time that is a minimum. You have to have a minimum of, a 3.7, 3.6, I mean, just to even have a chance. And most universities, medical schools, will tell you what they want. I mean, but 3.7, and a lot of universities say they want about a 505. 505, 508, that's what they want. 500, I still think there's a chance. It's just, just gotta get lucky. And you need to start looking and apply to more than one university. I would say most students should apply for at least 3 or 4 universities, so that way you have, some options.
Do you recommend that for like graduate school too?
I would say probably at least 3, and the reason why is because I would want to know, so let's say for example, because I know you talked about the, the online university, so maybe you apply to one online university and then try to apply to 2 different universities. I'd always suggest bigger ones because there's more TA positions possible. And so like around here, University of Arkansas, Pitt State possibly, even maybe, MSU maybe if they have what you want. The bigger the university is, a lot of times they have more scholarship opportunities. I would always try to make my decision based off cost. If I have a better chance of getting, a TA position or some type of on-campus job there, I'd rather go there, cut that cost almost in half. I mean, some of these TA positions, I mean, pretty much pay almost everything. Plus you get a stipend, so, I mean, I'd always encourage, doing that, over, going online and having to pay everything out of pocket, because, I mean, it's just the loans that add up so fast. I mean, you won't even think about it and you're already at 20, 30 grand. And so, I would always look at that cost. Unless, now, if you're going into a field that's going to be paying you a lot of money, then maybe it's worth it financially.
Yeah, liberal arts usually.
Yeah. So you want to be careful. Now another option that you can look at, let's say, for example, and this is just because my wife, as some of my wife's a school teacher, and a lot of these school districts actually will help pay for you to go back to school and work on your master's. Now every school district is different. Some are better than others. I know in Carthage, they would pay for about, I don't know, it's probably about close to half of the cost. They would reimburse you. So you would actually have to pay for it that semester, and after you completed and completed those classes, they would reimburse you, up to a certain amount per credit hour. I mean, which would pay for about half of it, which wasn't too bad. I think it was like 100 and something a credit hour that they would pay, which I thought was pretty nice. I know in Oklahoma, like Ada, where my wife went to school at, in that public school district, they actually require you to have a master's degree to work there, but they will help pay. They'll pay for it. So, which is pretty nice because they have a university that's in that town. So a lot of times, and they have one of the best teaching programs there, and so they actually require that, but yet they'll pay. So, so yeah. So I mean, you really want to look around. Try to find that best deal. Look at certain programs. I know some.